The air inside gate C-22 was thick with the dry scent of stale coffee and the lingering bitterness of microwaved breakfast sandwiches. Travelers shifted restlessly, tapping their feet, refreshing their phones, stealing impatient glances at the clock. Some faked patience better than others, their expressions frozen somewhere between boredom and irritation. A burst of static crackled over the intercom. Now boarding Group 1 for Flight 318 to Boston Logan. First-class passengers may now proceed to the gate. From the cluster of waiting bodies, a man emerged. His name was Micah Langston. He wore a deep charcoal blazer over a crisp white Oxford, with dark jeans and leather loafers polished to a muted shine. His face was clean-shaven save for the faintest shadow along his jaw, and there was a quiet, deliberate rhythm to his stride, the kind that belonged to someone who understood the weight of time and chose not to waste it. In one hand, Micah carried a worn leather messenger bag. Under the other arm, a paperback copy of The Fire Next Time tucked neatly. He didn't hurry, didn't puff himself up, didn't scan the room for an audience. He simply moved, with the easy, measured grace of a man who had long since learned not to ask permission to take up space. The gate agent offered him a polite smile as he passed. Micah returned it with a slight nod, then walked down the jet bridge into the humming belly of the plane. Inside, the cabin lights were cool and bright, the air perfumed with recycled atmosphere and hints of disinfectant. Micah found his seat, 2A, window side, first class. He slid into it without ceremony, buckled his belt, and opened his book to a dog-eared page, letting the world around him slip into a dull blur. The title had always resonated with him, not because it was new, but because some truths, however bitter, never stopped needing to be read. A few minutes later, the neighboring seat filled. A woman, perhaps in her late 40s, settled into 2B with the sharp precision of someone used to being seen. Her tailored blazer was cream-colored and impeccable. Her heels clicked unnecessarily on the carpeted floor. Margot Hensley was her name, the kind of woman whose calendar was lined with back-to-back Zoom meetings, who measured days not in hours but in deliverables. Her designer bag nestled beneath her seat as she adjusted her silk scarf, glancing sideways at Micah almost reflexively. She did a double take, slight, but noticeable. Micah didn't lift his eyes. He turned a page, the thin rustle loud in the tiny world of first class. Margot shifted in her seat, crossed her legs, uncrossed them, adjusted her scarf again. Her glances were brief but insistent, flickering from Micah's face to his book to his leather bag and back again, each sweep leaving a thin residue of scrutiny in the air. Micah felt it. He always did. That low, almost imperceptible tremor in the atmosphere when someone decides you don't belong and doesn't know how to justify it, even to themselves. The young flight attendant, buzz-cut hair, polished shoes, efficient smile, came down the aisle offering pre-flight beverages. Micah accepted a glass of water with a brief thanks. Margot waved him off with a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. When the attendant moved on, Margot leaned slightly toward Micah, her tone casual, practiced. Heading to Boston for work? Micah lowered his book a fraction. His voice was steady. Yeah, you. She gave a short laugh, brittle at the edges. Conference. Healthcare compliance. Riveting stuff. Her fingers twisted absently at the wedding ring on her left hand. Micah gave a nod, polite but detached. Government or private? Margot blinked, then smiled thinly. Private sector. Consultancy. It was the kind of answer that said everything and nothing. The conversation ended there. Micah turned another page. Margot turned her attention, half-heartedly, to her phone. But the glances didn't stop. They never said much, those glances. But they always spoke volumes. When the flight attendants closed the overhead bins and called for final boarding, Margot's restlessness grew more apparent. Her hands tightened and loosened around the strap of her purse. Her feet shifted. Her eyes flicked across the cabin like she was waiting for someone, or something, to fix whatever discomfort gnawed at her insides. Micah knew it without looking. He'd known it long before he stepped onto this plane. People like Margot didn't always recognize the bias roiling in their guts. Sometimes they mistook it for intuition, for caution, for trusting their instincts. The plane began its slow crawl toward the runway. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead fans thrummed. A baby 2 rows back began to whimper. Micah closed his book, placed it neatly in his bag, and leaned his head against the cool plastic of the window. Maybe he could sleep through the awkwardness, the heavy sense of being weighed and judged and found lacking. Then, through the drowsy hum, he heard it. "Excuse me." Margot's voice, soft, almost apologetic, but edged with something sharper. The same flight attendant appeared beside her row. He crouched slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you," Margot said, lowering her voice, "but I'm feeling uncomfortable. Could I possibly be moved?" The attendant blinked. "Is there something wrong with your seat?" "Not exactly." She hesitated. Her eyes darted to Micah, then away. I have a bad feeling. A gut instinct." Micah opened his eyes. He turned his head. He waited. The attendant, to his credit, didn't immediately nod or rush off. He asked, "What specifically is making you uncomfortable, ma'am?" Margot swallowed. "It's just his behavior. He's watching me. He's acting strange." The attendant glanced at Micah, sitting still, looking tired, not threatening. "I see," the attendant said neutrally. "Let me check with my supervisor." He walked briskly away. Micah exhaled slowly, turned fully to Margot. His voice, when he spoke, was soft but clear enough for the rows around them to hear. "Is there something you want to ask me?" Margot stiffened. "Oh, no, of course not. You're uncomfortable," Micah finished for her. "Because I'm sitting here." Margot flushed. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." There was a sharp, uncomfortable stillness now. Other passengers were glancing over, pretending not to listen, leaning subtly in. Micah leaned back, resting his head against the window again. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He was just tired. He'd played out this same scene 1,000 different ways in 1,000 different places. 5 minutes later, the supervisor arrived. A wiry man with a tight expression and a professional smile. "My name's Sean. I understand there's a concern." Margot jumped in quickly. "Yes, I don't feel safe. I asked to be moved." Sean turned to Micah. "And you, sir?" Micah's voice was steady. "I sat down. I read my book. She decided I didn't belong." Sean hesitated. "Sir, do you have any identification you can show us?" Micah didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open. The badge inside gleamed under the cabin lights. "Special Agent Micah Langston, Department of Homeland Security." The effect was immediate. Margot's face went ghost white. The supervisor straightened instantly. His voice, when he spoke again, was noticeably sharper, more respectful. "Thank you, sir. No further action needed." Micah closed his wallet calmly, tucked it away. Margot opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Around them, the silence sharpened. Micah spoke without venom, without raised voice, without drama. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask what I do. You decided." Margot's lips parted. "I didn't mean." "You did," Micah said simply. "You meant every second of it." And there it was. The truth laid bare at 35,000 feet. Margot sat, frozen. Her phone lay face down in her lap, her fingers nerveless. She didn't move for the rest of the flight. Micah leaned back against the window and closed his eyes. He didn't need to win. He just needed her to sit with it. Because that's where the real change begins, in the quiet, shameful places people don't want to look. When the wheels touched down in Boston, Margot finally found her voice again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Micah opened his eyes slowly. "Are you sorry you were wrong?" he asked. "Or just sorry you got caught?" Margot blinked hard. "I'm sorry I didn't see you." Micah nodded once. "See better next time." And then, without ceremony, without drama, he stood, shouldered his bag, and walked into the terminal. Another flight behind him, another silent war won, another reminder that dignity is carried from within, even when the world refuses to hand it to you.